Before I discuss the techniques I have used to create this portrait and you start creating your own, you must accept the idea that your portrait will not end up being identical to your photograph. You will never be able to create the same textures, details, shadows and highlights as the ones you see in all the areas of your photograph. Around the 2-minute mark in the video, I was uncertain whether I had created anything of actual value. It was only because I persisted until the end I realised I was happy with what I created. First, ensure you have a selection of skin tone oil pastels that are reasonably similar to your subject's skin tones. At the corner of her chin, I used a mixture of brown and white to create a subtle small highlight area. I decided not to include the dark shadow lines as it would have not really added much to what I was trying to achieve overall. You do not need to make a like-for-like copy of your photograph. Looking closely at the photograph, there did appear to be hints of yellow and brown mixed together on her face on different areas. This area was blended back into the shade of brown, which was applied to most areas of her face. Whatever colour, tint, shade or tone you apply to the face, you need to use either a colour or white to blend areas or oil pastels together. For most people, our skin tones are naturally perfectly blended. This means we don't see harsh lines that separate the different areas of skin tone. To create an accurate portrait of anyone, the key is to constantly keep looking at your subject. We need to use a photograph to know what a realistic face looks like. We cannot create a realistic portrait using our imagination. I noticed a small area of what looked like pink, so I tried to replicate this on my portrait with a bit of brown mixed in with it. This is the same brown that I spoke about earlier. Another area that was more challenging to recreate was the slight shadow under her lip. I created this shadow by applying the black first and then mixing a darker shade of brown into it. I then blended it out into the prominent brown colour I used for the majority of the portrait. I am working from the edge inwards because it is the darker edges that create the impression the face is not two-dimensional but three-dimensional. You will see at the end how this helps to make the lips look like they are three-dimensional and protruding. You may also notice how I am using the white oil pastels to blend tones together and accentuate the highlights on her skin. Accentuate means to make something more prominent or noticeable. On her left cheek, I noticed again there was a large area of yellow and brown. This is most likely because of the lighting and how the printed image looks, but I still need to create my portrait so it was clearly inspired by the original photograph. To blend this yellow and brown colour into my dominant brown colour, I used the white oil pastel to bridge the gap. To create a nose that appears three-dimensional, you need to add a darker tones around the edges of the wings of your nose. Doing this will accentuate the fact that your nose is three-dimensional and protrudes. Remember to use a mixture of tones to show that you have a nose bone. This will accentuate the fact that your nose is three-dimensional and protrudes outwards. It is easy to think that your nostrils are pure black, but they are not. It is an area that is darker than the other areas of your face. Use a darker shade to colour in your nostrils. I used a combination of dark black and brown. The direction of your mark making is also really important to create the shapes of your nose. If you apply oil pastels up and down in a straight line, your nose will look two-dimensional. Using contour mark making techniques will make your nose look three-dimensional. Contour means to mold something into a specific shape. A ball is curved, so you would shade it in a curved direction. The tip of your nose is similar to the shape of a ball. From this point onwards, I want you to look at how I am mixing skin tone oil pastels with white oil pastels to create bright highlights. How do I mix skin tone oil pastels with black oil pastels to create dark shadows? How do I mix different coloured oil pastels to show how it can be used to produce different various shades of human skin, eyes and lips? Am I using the swirling motion to smoothly blend oil pastels together and remove the natural texture of the paper? Am I using accurate colours where possible? And finally, how am I using appropriate mark making techniques to show detail and texture?